Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten from IDERA, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Quack Chat webinar titled Compare and Synchronize Database Schemas for Oracle and SQL Server. This webcast will be recorded, so you will be able to view it again if you'd like, and the recording will be available in our resource center on aquafold.com in a few days. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the questions feature in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. We are very excited to have Devin Gallagher, IDERA Senior Solutions Engineer, here to discuss how Aqua Data Studio's Schema Compare feature finds differences in DDL statements between database objects in two schemas and allows users to synchronize the source schema to the target schema for various databases. With that, Devin, over to you.
Great, thanks Kirsten. Hi everybody. Okay, I'm sharing my full screen and we have a number of different areas to go through today. So here's an introduction slide that I'll use as a bit of a guide. And there's probably an assumption of some familiarity with Aqua Data Studio menus. So we'll dive in and move forward as though there's some familiarity with the menus, but there's other videos on introductions to Aqua. So there's areas we'll point out for catching up on just the general interface. But here, maybe just to back up and introduce the main tools menu and the compare drill downs. This is how that list has been built, but then there's certain advanced navigation features and shortcuts and benefits that we'll show in different ways of invoking these primary menus. But just to bring back the main slide again, the tools menu, compare tools drill down, has two wizard interfaces at the start, the schema compare and schema synchronize. And so those are the most robust areas that step you through a left and right hand side or a source and target, and then have deployment capabilities, reporting capabilities. So we'll step through examples there. And then the subset of menus has a lot of ad hoc compare features that can be very beneficial. So this Quack Chat will cover compares and diffs, and then the synchronization capabilities. So really some flexibility in terms of how you like to see differences, your change management methodology, and then even stepping into some of the relationship diagramming that Aqua has included rather than being in a separate tool. Aqua has easy diagramming of tables and views and constraints and indexes, and those have compare features as well. So you can compare models, see what's different, and then choose the synchronize back in the schema synchronize wizard. So we'll introduce these different areas. Some of these are invocable from either a right-click menu or shift-click, control-click here and there. So those are shortcuts. And these are very popular, impressive, slick features that really make Aqua very popular in this space, from traditional case tools to modeling tools for change management. There's areas that we're all familiar with over the years, and any help in this area really can be beneficial and time saving and help reduce errors and improve performance of your application. So probably helpful in terms of the range of areas we'll see. And then as you dive in and use Aqua on a regular basis, these features really become easy to use, and you can see how users have driven the navigation of the product and where these features have been added. So that's what I'm leading to here. Some of these last highlights, ways of invoking these wizards just by a shift click or control click in the navigation tree saves you, building the left or right hand side. So we'll go over the control click for object compare, the control click for schema compare in the navigation tree, and then some of the hidden right click menus in the query analyzer or the SQL editor, where you can invoke a data compare or results compare or a side-by-side file compare just from the right-click menus. Okay, so that's the main agenda here. Maybe I'll revisit this just to make sure we cover all of these areas. But you can see in terms of the interface of Aqua Data Studio, or in case you are brand new to Aqua Data Studio, you have a workspace as you might expect in a database IDE. So you have pop-outs on the left or right-hand side, and then a workspace here in the middle. And so you have tabs where you can work on your schema compares and migration scripts and SQL scripts and look at diffs. And so we'll introduce how to invoke these different areas, but just maybe starting with a clean layout here. And then on the left-hand side is where I have my database navigation tree. So you can see the ability to pin or dock these pop-out windows, move them to the left or right-hand side. And so I have the traditional left-hand side display for the navigation tree for the different databases that I support. And then on the right-hand side, I have my network or file system navigation. And so you have the ability to group your different Aqua Data Studio files or your own scripts or however you like to work, whether you use, say, version control systems and have Aqua talking to those version control systems, or you map network drives. If I just click on Mount Directory here, you can map different drives and perhaps share or collaborate with these Aqua Data Studio or SQL scripts or data sets to other users. So very flexible in terms of setting up your user interface in the way that's comfortable for you. And then here in the middle section is the tabs or the different areas that Aqua is strong at, and you can float these or undock these if you just right click on a tab. So we'll introduce some of these right click menus, and specifically here you can see there's an example of the compare that's a bit hidden on one of the tab right clicks. So we'll introduce driving from the compare menu. And Aqua is almost 20 years old now, so it's really been driven by end users over the years. And this compare tools list has grown. Really, it warrants its own primary menu. But with the loyalty of our users, there's a balance of not moving things around too much and making the interface vary too much. So this list has grown, but really a lot of powerful drill downs here, where there you see the two wizard interfaces, Schema Compare, Schema Synchronize, and those look the same. There's an additional ability to generate the migration scripts with the Schema Synchronize. And then there's certain platform specific areas that we'll point out where the Schema Compare can be across different platforms. Schema Synchronize is the same database vendor platform. So you can synchronize Oracle to Oracle. You can synchronize SQL Server to SQL Server. Okay, so we'll introduce these areas and then probably circle back and maybe go through some of these in different ways that would address some of the different use cases. So whether you're a developer and you're migrating PL SQL code or T-SQL, or you're a DBA and you have to do compares and diffs and post reports and post ER diagrams and then show people differences in a documentation fashion, or keep track of these migration scripts and the SQL generation capabilities. These are all ways you can use Aqua Data Studio, very easily and very in a flexible way that really helps save you time and justify the tool, even if you have other methodologies in place. Okay, so here on the left-hand side are the databases that we'll be working with today. If I just expand or introduce some of these areas, these are the navigation folders that I've created, so you can connect to these different databases under the server, register server. And so there's different videos to introduce those areas for you. And then you can create folders and group your database connections in different ways. So the most common databases that I've been working on recently with customers are Oracle, SQL Server, and then Snowflake is obviously a data warehouse that's growing in user base. Of course, MySQL, so I have these grouped together, but I have flexibility to group any of these connections in ways that make sense. So if you're a DBA and you are responsible for SQL Server and Oracle, you can clone these connections and create different color coding to keep track of where you are. So you can see here I have some variation color coding in terms of Oracle, SQL Server. And so those are ways that help in terms of change management, and compares and diffs. So those are some bells and whistles that you might want to take advantage of. But for today's demonstration, let's drill in here to a couple of these areas. So if I drill into Oracle, I see my schema, storage management security. When I drill into SQL Server, I see databases, snapshots management security. So you'll see some variations in the navigation tree just based on the platform, right? So for MySQL, I see databases management security. So here, if I drill in Oracle schema or drill into my schema or schemas, I have some filters set up. So, that's a benefit, or maybe an area to show here. If I just go into server properties, the filter tab, this might be helpful in terms of customizing these areas that you need to do comparisons or synchronizations with. You can customize your view of your world. So here I can see just a few of the schemas that I'm focusing on for today's demonstration. So I have some schemas in Oracle that will perform some comparisons and synchronizations with. And there's the filter tab within that server properties. For SQL Server, here you can see I'll drill into my databases, and so here's where I have filters on my databases in SQL Server, right? So depending on the platform, you have that capability to customize your view of your world. And so here I have a couple of versions of the healthcare database that we'll use in the SQL Server, compare diffs and synchronization. Okay, so just to introduce my environment here and the navigation tree. And then there's lots of right-click benefits as you navigate in Aqua Data Studio. And so those are areas that we'll introduce here today. So here, if I right-click on a connection, or if I drill into a connection in my objects, you have lots of right-click capabilities as you navigate the object tree. And then some of the hidden areas that we'll talk about, I mentioned in the PowerPoint. Just to maybe start here, if I control click on two different objects and then right click, notice some of the hidden compare features are invoked. So now I'm selecting multiple objects and right clicking, and there's compare, schema synchronize. Okay, so just a little introduction there as to some shortcuts for invoking these. But let's dive in and start introducing these menus, and then just show some different ways of using the tool in ways that would make sense for you. Okay, so the schema compare and schema synchronize are a similar look and feel. And so if I just start with the schema compare window, you'll see it has this left and right hand side, choose your source, choose your target. And so here, if I drill into choose server, this would be a maybe more manual way to drill in here. So I could drill in here to say my SQL Server databases, choose my left-hand side, or choose my source. So maybe I'll start with a comparison of a test environment where I've made some changes. I want to compare that to my production or development box that I'd like to deploy these changes to, right? And so choose your left to right hand side, but there's some ways of switching that. You see the arrow, the double arrows here to flip-flop those. So let me just choose the source and target. And then again, this is a little more manual, just clicking in the tree, but we'll show some shortcuts there. All right, so here's the familiar schema compare tool look and feel of the user interface. And then here I can select my objects and then kick off the compare, right? So here, if I say choose all my objects, you'll see those listed on the lower portion of the screen, and then some other helpful wizards here. So here I could say uncheck all the objects. Maybe I just want to choose tables and views and maybe procs, right? So you can isolate certain objects, and then you see the left or right hand side. Here are some other settings that would be helpful in terms of what you're documenting. Are you comparing storage, some of the scripting comparisons, what you're ignoring in white spaces and cases, right? So just introducing some of these tabs or selection boxes. And then some other areas here. If you were going in a different direction, you could just flip-flop those very easily. So swap source and target servers. And then just select your objects again, and it would map those for you. Okay, so different ways of choosing your source and target. And then if I was to click compare. This would kick off this compare and provide a summary. And here, maybe if I back up a little bit just to show a previous schema compare, it would have a side-by-side of what's on the source, what's on the target, and then you'd be able to dive into this look and feel. So I was just showing this interface here to then introduce the difference between the Schema Synchronize window. Okay, so here's the result set of just a comparison, but here is a result set of the Schema Synchronize where you have this additional column for sync, and then this icon is enabled as well. Okay, so why don't I kick off that example in SQL Server. Oops. Or I could rerun this. Or introduce the shortcut menus as well. So maybe I'll do that before I kick off this comparison. So here was the schema compare where I had to choose the left and right hand side, which was a little bit manual in the drill down. So if I back up to the navigation tree, and here we're in SQL Server, here if I just control click and then right click, notice the shortcuts are enabled for me. So this saves a little bit of time here from the navigation tree. So just shift clicking or control clicking and then schema compare, boom, selects those for you. Okay. And then also the order that you select influences the source and target, right? So let me close this window again. So here if I start with this test as my left-hand side and then control click, right click, here's schema compare, schema synchronize. Notice it has that as well. So here, if I want to change the direction, I could easily select that. But the order was influenced by how I selected here, right? So if I chose healthcare and then healthcare test, and then right click, schema synchronize, you see that's the order that it built as well. So can easily flip-flop that, or the order you control click would influence that. So why don't I select all the objects, kick this off, and then we'll keep moving forward as that executes, and we'll show some other bells and whistles here. But I did just want to introduce the delta between the schema compare. Is the schema compare can be any platform to any platform, and the schema synchronize is the same platform, same vendor platform, and then you have this additional column or field for the sync script and the synchronize schema. So those are the two differences in the wizards, but otherwise very similar. And so we'll probably kick this off more than once within this demonstration. So if I click on compare here and let this chug away, this will hit the catalog or the dictionary on the source and target. You can see strong performance here, hundreds of objects, and it has these different stages and status. And then a couple of other things I'll mention here. You have the ability to allocate more memory to Aqua, and so if that's a benefit, a lot of our client machines have plenty of memory. That will speed up some of the schema compare performance. And so just under help, memory monitor, here's an easy way to bump up the memory available for Aqua. By default, it really never took a big footprint, but now with the client machine performance improved over the years, I always like to point that out. And so you can allocate more memory to Aqua, but then the tabular interface here lets you use other tabs and windows as you're working in Aqua. So I could kick off a schema compare and then, perhaps come back to some other code I was working on, right? And so, here maybe is some SQL I was working on, or any other database responsibilities I have that I'm using Aqua for. You can revisit or explore as, say, that schema compare is running. Okay, so multitasking or working or multi-threaded performance is a benefit for Aqua, where while that schema compare is running, you can use other tabs and work on other areas within Aqua. Okay, so here that's almost finished up, just about finished up. And then that will bring up the left and right hand side comparison window. And so this is probably familiar to many of us in terms of what we're seeing here, where you'll see, okay, what objects are in common but different, what's on one side, what's on the other. Okay, so maybe just to spend some time here in this window and exploring, and again, this is a similar look and feel here for the Schema Compare or Schema Synchronize. You just have some additional platform capability in the sync script here. But either way, these icons would be similar, and then some of the navigation capabilities we'll introduce here. So here I can just minimize everything and just get a summary here of what's in one side, what's on the other side, what's in common, what's different. And then here would be expand all. So then as I highlight here an object in common, I can explore what's different, what code varies, and then we'll talk about deployment in other ways as we get a little bit further here. So there's reporting information. There's both Excel and HTML reporting. You have the ability to make changes here and rerun the compare. So different shortcuts here that you might expect. So just to maybe mouse over and show these, refresh would just rerun this on the fly. So as you make changes, you want to do a new diff or new compare, that would kick that off right away. Here's edit, where if you want to make changes to the objects or the filter in terms of what objects you're comparing in the Schema Compare, this would give you a warning, say, okay, you're about to lose all this previous information. Do you want to kick that off? So the refresh would just kick off a new comparison. Here's the edit, where you could actually change the filtering. Then here are some of the reporting capabilities. So we'll look at those. And then here's compare data. So here I've highlighted a table. If I wanted to compare the data within that table, this is almost a hidden way to invoke the compare data within the Schema Compare. Okay, so that's a little bit hidden. We'll revisit that. But okay, so let's maybe explore some of these areas. So here I just ran this live Schema Compare for SQL Server. Here are some previous Schema Compares I had run earlier. So here's, say, an Oracle Schema Compare with a few more objects maybe that reporting would show in a little more robust way. But we can step through an Oracle example here, and we'll do that for the deployment or the synchronization. But wherever you have the result set of the Schema Compare with this different only in source, only in target, you have the reporting or documentation capabilities, right? And so here I was looking at the Schema Synchronize from Oracle to Oracle. Here, if I visit, say, a SQL Server Synchronize, or here's even a cross-platform Oracle to SQL Server, which is interesting. So if you'd like to compare cross-platform objects, say MySQL to Oracle, you can document that as well. So what I'm just pointing out here are some different tabs that I have open with my result set. And now let's take a look at some of the reporting here, right? So here, if I wanted to report between this Oracle Schema Compare, click on HTML, shows a directory available. So here I have a compare directory. So I've created some different groupings here where I like to keep my Aqua Data Studio compare result sets. So whether you're choosing platform or however you like to organize your navigation tree, this would create an HTML subfolder, and then you can easily view that and share this or post this. And so just, documentation might be important here, right? Just show me this in a report. And so here's same information, what's different. So what's in common but different. So then a non-equal sign. What's on one side, what's on the other, right? What's only in the source, what's only in the target. So you see this documentation, right? So maybe save yourself some phone calls if people need to see what's different out there, or if you need to delegate some change management responsibilities. This is an easy way to document that and post that. And then you have this side-by-side diff capability. So here, some different tabs that I've set up that we can explore and look at some of these differences. But this was the example of the HTML report. Right next to that is the Excel icon. And so this would allow you to say, look at this and say an Excel spreadsheet, which is, not as not as vibrant as the HTML, I would say, but you still have the color coding and just a quick visual of what's in common, what's different, what's on source, what's on target. Okay, so then of course this could be saved if you need to document this in different ways. So just introducing some of these icons here. You know, I mentioned these different icons. The refresh will just kick off the compare on the fly. The edit would actually let you choose the wizard again. So, you know, similar look and feel. This was, here's the SQL Server compare that we just ran. And so now that's a tab that we can dive into and work on. And then since this is for SQL Server and Oracle, let's kick off an Oracle compare as well. And then we'll be able to dive into those. So here, just you know, just to show the similar look and feel, which is a benefit with Aqua, is whatever platform you're working in, the menus are similar. And so once you become productive in using Aqua in one platform, you can do that across other platforms as well. Okay, so we ran the SQL Server compare. Here again, more manual tools, compare tools, schema synchronize, and I could drill into my Oracle source and target, right? So choose my Oracle group, right? Choose my Oracle schema. So I'll choose this maybe development schema where I've made some changes and like to compare that to my test server. And then I can manually drill in here and choose that target schema, say okay, and now I've set up my left and right hand side. So similar, just introducing this similar look and feel here. Choose my objects, and then I can kick off that schema compare or filter, right? Maybe just for the sake of time, maybe I'll reduce this just to say tables, views, and PL SQL. But similar, you know, similar options here depending on where you are in terms of what objects you'd like to compare, and then you know, kicking that off and allowing the catalog to do the side-by-side diffs. And then of course I mentioned the right-click menu will save you time from having to perform this, right? So here, if I on the left-hand side navigate the tree and use my control click, you'll save time here. So here I could kick this window off. So maybe I'll just isolate here. It's just some tables and PL SQL. Click compare, and now it's hitting the Oracle catalog and it will complete this. So here are some 2 live compares that we've run. And again, as I mentioned, you can use other windows in Aqua as you're letting those transactions complete or that comparison complete. So just to introduce, while that finishes, the shift click for Oracle. So again, if I drill into my schemas, here. So here I have some similar objects or environments in this dev environment, in this investment environment, this global investment management schema. So it has some client broker stock type tables. So here, if I was to just control click and then right click, there's schema compare, schema synchronize. Notice it populates that much more quickly than having to choose the left or right hand side. So little time saver there. And just to tie this into the PowerPoint, so we've just been starting here with the schema compare and schema synchronize, where those are similar look and feel. You just have some additional synchronized capabilities that we'll explore here as those wizards complete. Then from any of the menus, you have the documentation, right? So HTML or Excel report, and then a bit of a hidden compare data from the main menu that we'll revisit as those complete as well. Okay, and then the shortcut ways of invoking those are what we've jumped to. So control click for the schema compare, and then if you just wanted to do an individual object compare, you have that as well. And so we'll tie that into the drill down into these sub compare areas. Okay, so all right, so let's close this window. This was just the shift click example or the control click example. And then these are, okay, so these both finished up. So here's my schema compare that I ran in SQL Server. And then here's the Oracle. Okay, so Oracle's still finishing up. Schema compare, SQL Server is completed. And then want to introduce the delta between this sync column. So here, if I go back to say I compare across different platforms, there is no sync column, right? So that's the delta between the Schema Compare and the Schema Synchronize. You get the migration synchronization column, and then that icon's enabled, okay? Okay, so let's back up here a little bit and take a look at some of these drill downs, and then we'll lead up to the migration or the synchronization capability as that finishes. All right, so the tab compare, directory compare, file compare, copy compare, and results compare are very popular, easy to use areas that, once you're familiar with Aqua, can be very beneficial. So the tab compare is your query analyzer. So when it means tabs, it means a tab of code, right? So here's some different SQL transactions, or here if I back up to some complex SQL I have in, say, Oracle and SQL Server. Again, I have this investment broker database. So here if I run this complex SQL statement, I can see the results set. And then here would be, for example, the execution plan in SQL Server, right? So some examples there of just executing SQL, looking at the result set, looking at the execution plan. And then here, here's maybe a different SQL statement, right? So let me run that, and you have some different SQL statements. Here, if I just look at my SQL history, you can see a history of SQL you've executed. So here are a couple of SQL statements I just executed in SQL Server. If I wanted to compare that code, here under the Tools menu, Compare Tools, tab Compare lists all the open tabs, and then I could choose that left or right hand side. Okay, so in this example, I'm comparing these two SQL statements. It's showing those editors here. I can say okay, and now it has a side-by-side comparison of the differences between those two statements. Okay. And this look and feel exists in a number of areas, so we'll introduce this in different ways. But let's just back up a little bit, and we can show some other comparison features, or an easy way to get to that feature. As you might expect, there's a little shortcut. So there's the Tools, Compare Tools, Tab Compare. That's how I invoke that side-by-side compare. Or if I just right-click on the tab, notice there's Compare there, and that would get you to the same spot where it's saying, okay, you're comparing this tab. What's the target that you're comparing against? Okay, so you can invoke the compare on the right click on a tab, or just Tools menu, tab Compare, and then choose any two open tabs that you have, tabs of code. Okay, so similar to that is what we see in the bottom portion of the Schema Compare, right? So if I go back to, say, that Schema Compare that we had executed, or here's the Schema Compare in SQL Server I just executed. As I highlight a piece of code, I see that side-by-side comparison, right? And so, very helpful. You'll get familiar with, how to do these comparisons, and then other bells and whistles that users like. I'll scroll on my mouse scroll bar here on this right-hand side of the code and see how the code's lining up with each other, right? So these are helpful, visual, impressive ways that Aqua's been developed over the years that users really like, okay? And so this is an example of just an individual SQL statement compare, or, we were looking at this tab compare, right? And so yeah, if you have long pieces of code, you have that scroll capability. And similar is the directory compare, right? And so here we were looking at the tab compare. Here's a directory compare, which will compare a folder and all the files within that folder, right, or directory. So here, just choose your file or directory, right? Choose your network drive or folder. So here I have a couple of directories with a couple of files in common. Click Show Differences, click Calculate Differences, and that'll do a side-by-side compare of those directories. Right, and so here's a file that's just on one folder. Here's a file that's just on another folder on the left or right hand side. But here's a file in common, and then again I have this scroll capability. So I'm just scrolling to my mouse here, and you can see these side-by-side comparisons. So we're getting to hundreds of lines of code here, and this really can help save you time give that pop capability with where I see the differences. And then of course that, as you become familiar with Aqua, some of these can really be time saving, and you have these set up to do these deltas or diffs very easily. Okay, so we're running some wizards here in terms of the schema, compare, and synchronize. Now we're introducing the drill down look and feel of some of these windows, which are in these wizards as well. So similar look and feel as you explore these. File compare would just show you any two files, source and target. So if you had those open in code tabs already, that would be beneficial there, and that would do a similar side by side. So you have this look and feel that you might expect, and that's really a huge time saver. So here I was drilling into these in the navigation tree and choosing the left or right hand side. So again, with the shift click capabilities, right? If I have an object in common, so here in my Oracle environment in this dev schema, I'll choose an object, and then maybe I'll control click to a different object, right? So same object name, but in a different schema. So I'll control click here, and then again, right click, there's the compare just for those two objects. And that instantly does a side-by-side DDL compare. So, that was pretty quick, right? Just control click, side-by-side compare. A more manual would be, say, a copy control C and then a multiple control C compare, or what we call the copy compare. So this is memory or clipboard. You can control C multiple pieces of code to memory, right? Just a Windows clipboard. And then Aqua has easy ways of showing those, right? So here, let's just work with the same client transaction table. I just control clicked in the navigation tree for two different objects, and then right clicked, and there was compare, right? Very, very quickly. So there's other scripting capabilities in Aqua, right? If I just right click on an object, there's script object, right, to new window, right? So new window is a query analyzer. So if I just right click and script this object to a new query analyzer window with the create, you could do one at a time, or if you're working in an editor, you have different ways of showing this. So now these are both open in an editor. So I'll just close this window. So if I had already copied to memory or clipboard, that would be ways of showing this as well. Let me just maybe right click on an individual table, right click here, and there's again the scripting, right? So here's script object, there's create or create full. So just right clicked and extract the DDL to multiple editors for these tables. Now let me just copy to memory, right? So right click here or control C, copy, right? And so here's this client transaction table in one schema. Here's this client's transactions table in another schema. I'm just copying to clipboard, right? So maybe I'll do this one with storage. So again, right click, copy. So now in the tools menu, copy compare, it's showing me what's in my clipboard, right? So here I can see this, the DDL for both these tables. I can control click or shift click on different, if they weren't consecutive, here I'll just shift click. And that's a side-by-side showing, okay, these are the same. One includes storage. Otherwise, those are identical. Oh, actually here, you can see a constraint, right? So here's the difference, and I have constrained storage on the source side or left-hand side, right? So very easy, right-click or wizard interfaces for stepping through quick diffs or quick compares. And then the results compare, let's circle back to. So that's some data compare of results, or within the schema synchronize or schema compare wizards, you can dive into a table results compare as well. Okay, so just keeping an eye on the clock here and the list. So we kicked off some schema compares. We'll be closing out with some of the Synchronize or migration capabilities. And then you have the ad hoc or random compare features drivable from either right-click menus or the tools main menu. And then some of these are embedded in the schema compare and schema synchronize. So we've seen some of these with the file compare and the side-by-side. So let's keep moving forward here. I think you've seen some of the shortcuts in the navigation tree, and then the query analyzer. We just mentioned the tab compare as a way to do side-by-side compares. So as we circle back to see what's finished up here with these comparisons. So here was the SQL Server compare, and then here's the Oracle compare. And so again, you have that summary information here. How many objects were different, what's on the source, what's on the target. And then here is an example of the compare data field that I wanted to introduce, where if you have tables with different data, you have the ability to kick off a data compare just by selecting that table, and then it will show you what data is different between those two tables. And sometimes this is a confirmation that there's no data different, right? But you have left or right hand side, and so here you can see these two tables. One was empty, one had data, one didn't. Depending on where you are, you have the ability to look at comparison of data in different ways. So we'll circle back with the data compare. There's some savvy that we can introduce to that wizard, but you have the ability to look at a results compare in different ways, and then the table data compare. Maybe just to introduce, here's let's see an example of okay, I wanted to just give you a quick introduction here of the look and feel of the results compare. So let me maybe I'll just open up a query analyzer real quick and run some different SQL. This is the last window that we perhaps haven't seen yet. So here, let me just kick off a couple of similar SQL. Okay, so here's a SQL statement, and the SQL statement with a where clause, so a subset of data or result sets. And right click here, and here's results compare. So if I wanted to compare data sets between two different queries, that's what this is showing here. And so this would allow you to navigate or sort between records on one side or the other and see what's different here. So so here I can see a comparison. One was a SQL statement and one was a subset of that. So here I can see, okay, 77 rows versus 39 rows, which are different, and then you can sort or isolate your primary key and sort in different ways here. So there's a little bit of savvy to introduce with how to navigate this data compare. So just introducing that here, and then that's something that you can invoke from, say, the schema compare wizards as well. So here was, say, the Oracle schema compare that we just executed. I could choose a table and then explore the data differences between those two tables, right? So here's compare data for this list of objects, right? So here's a table in common that I could explore data differences between, and then you have the ability to deploy certain assignments in terms of synchronizing data. Okay, so let's move on to some of the synchronization capabilities. So here was, say, an Oracle left or right, side-by-side comparison. So I had this dev schema to this GIM schema. And then here's a list of the sync objects available. So that enables this synchronized schema icon. And this will prompt you to select certain objects to involve in that deployment. So you can check all if you're choosing all the objects. Otherwise, I could manually choose objects and deploy those changes, right? So here's this client transaction table where it has a constraint and an index on the left or right-hand side, depending on which direction you were going. And so you have that that capability or deployment script to change that. Here's a table just on the source. Maybe you want to bring that over to your target side, right? And so let's maybe select some different objects here and just dive into the synchronization wizard. You obviously can have different numbers of objects included in this synchronization script, but what we want to introduce is the look and feel here of the object wizard. So as I select the synchronized schema, and so this is available only in the Schema Synchronize wizard, right? So Schema Compare would not have this column or this icon enabled. But if I click on this, now a different wizard tab opens up, the Schema Synchronization. I can maybe unfloat this, or float this rather, just so you can see the tabs here, right? And so here I can see these different windows or tabs, and this will step me through with the next. So first it's pointing out dependencies to be aware of, right? So which objects are involved in this migration. And then these are some helpful options and warnings tabs if you have other related objects, or just letting you know you're changing structure from source to target. So as I click next here, these become enabled. You have different scripting windows as you might expect throughout the product. So SQL Server, you might have your Go separator. Maybe for Oracle, you have your semicolon, but you have that flexibility here in settings in Aqua. And then the review of the SQL script itself, which is always a nice feature. You don't want it to kick off without being able to take a look at that. And then some of the summary and warning tabs, right? And so here you can see we were dropping an index, or migrating the constraints, or creating a new table, right? So you can see there's the drop index, drop view, add constraint, create new table. Just a different example of some objects that we included in this synchronization. And then here, summary will just let you know, okay, what are you doing? You're creating this table, you're dropping this constraint, you're dropping this view, you're dropping this index, okay? And then warnings, if you had any warnings, any dependency warnings. So you have flexibility here. You can open this up in an editor. You can maybe choose different objects that were included in that. But obviously they just open script and editor is a nice feature there. And then you'd have the ability to choose which objects are deployed, or where you're migrating those changes to. So here, maybe I'll choose, so here in the SQL Server, maybe I'll just choose a couple of different objects here in terms of source and target, maybe a table, and then Schema Synchronize here in SQL Server, similar review dependencies. What's your object separator? There's the DDL script open in a query analyzer. Okay, so if you have those transactions ready to go, you could execute all. Here I could say parse through this. Here's this create table. So I could just select this individual table and execute that, and that would deploy those changes to the target environment. So here, if I just execute this individual create statement on the target, this would deploy that, and then you have the ability to rerun that comparison and then see what differences there are. So that's maybe a closeout. If I circle back to a previous Schema Compare that we executed, this refresh will just run the live compare again. And so that's a benefit after you perform your deployment, how to execute those and synchronize those. And then a last area that might be of interest is the compare data. And so we were looking at that in some different examples, where if you do have result sets for comparing data, or table data within an individual table, you have the ability to click on the compare data, and that would show, okay, so here's source and target that's different. Let me maybe circle back here to, okay, so here, here's a table where I could see if there's individual rows on a certain side, or left or right hand side, and then a side-by-side comparison of rows that are unique to one side or another, right? So here's deleted values or added values from a source or target, right? And so here I can see there's a row different between these two tables. And then here you can see what those are and actually isolate the differences here in the data set. If you isolate your primary key, this would be a way to circle the grid and see what those values are. So here I can see an altered value and what the difference is. And then here I could see a new row on the source side or target side. So depending on which direction you selected the compare result sets, you can implement those changes in different ways. But there's not data synchronize, so that's something to be aware of. So we have structure synchronize, but not data synchronize. It's just compare result sets or compare table data. And then another hidden compare area that's very beneficial for Aqua is some of the diagramming, ER modeling compares, right? So there's table diagramming across platforms. And so here I have some examples in, say, Oracle or SQL Server. And then here, without going too much into the data modeling capabilities, here I could reverse engineer and document in an ER model the database in terms of tables, views, and related objects. There's the compare features in the tools menu within the ER model. So compare with model, compare with database. This would allow me to just choose an individual Aqua Data Studio model, right? So maybe I'm going to a different version of a platform, or I have an existing model and I want to see some comparisons there. Just choose the target. So you have an existing model. You have some settings here that might influence how it sees differences, schema name or not. I'll just take the defaults here, and now this would be a way to say compare objects in a model from left or right hand side. What's on one side, what's on the other. And so here I have maybe a more robust example of some of those. Okay, so here's just say a model compare where it's showing, okay, what tables are in common but different, what are in common but the same, what's on one side, what's on the other, right? So the modeling comparison capability is very popular. And then, once you isolate what those objects are that you'd like to migrate, you could dive right into the object synchronization with the schema synchronization. Okay, so lots of productivity areas in using Aqua, and then little learning curve in terms of where the tabs are, but you really want to right click throughout the navigation tree, and for some of the compare shortcuts, control click on objects, right? So if I can control click on certain objects, I see shortcuts or reduced lists, right? If I right click on it, just a table itself, you can see a quite extensive list of shortcut features there. When I control click, it brings in the compare features and a shortened list, right? So compare, schema synchronize. Okay, so running out of time as usual. So thanks everybody for joining. We can open it up for questions here, and then just under help about our links to the community site. And then, a lot of these areas are documented. So here I tend to show the Aqua Data Studio compare drill down. So here's the summary of all the benefits of Aqua Data Studio kind of in one page. And then here's a summary of those compare and synchronize features. So this is all documented. There's different ways that you might have seen benefit here, and really been driven by end users over the years. So we're always looking for feedback and look for improvements here as Aqua continues to be developed. Version 20.5 is in its final stages, and it's being released end of this month, beginning of next month. And so that's going to bring some new platform support, a job scheduler, and just more enhancements to other areas in Aqua that are very popular, like the visual analytics and some of the Amazon RDMS platforms. Those are the big areas in the next version. Okay, so under the resources page, this is where this recording will be posted, and look for reoccurring topics that we like to engage with our customers on, and give some specific use case examples. And so at this point, let me hand it back over to Kirsten and open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you, Devin. So we have had a few questions come in. One question from the audience was, does Aqua Data Studio allow or provide for data sync scripting? So they asked an example where you identified a new record existed and one column had been changed.
Okay, so yes, so you have the synchronization capabilities for structure, but not data. So here, for example, here's a table, or maybe I'll switch back to, say, our Oracle example. So here's a table in common where this will show the difference in structure. And so if I chose the synchronization script for this table, yes, that would build the migration script. We have the ability to compare, and that click synchronize schema here, and that would step you through here. So here's the migration script to make those in sync. In this case, it was just altering this table to add the constraint, or drop the constraint, or add the index, or drop the index, depending on which direction you were going. But there's not a synchronized data. So to see the differences in data, you can do a compare data. So here, compare data from within the synchronize, but there's not a synchronized data. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Devin. Another question we had, can you compare the schema between an Oracle database and a SQL Server database?
You can. So you can, that's the compare, but not the synchronize. So here, let's see here. Okay. I had an example of that. I'm just not finding it right now. But yes, you can compare across platforms. So yeah, I mean, here, maybe just to show this a little more quickly. So here I have this GIM schema in SQL Server. If I control click to Oracle, right click, notice the synchronize is grayed out, but schema compare, boom, populates that left and right hand side, and then that would kick off for you. I think I had one that executed already. It's in that list. But yeah, you can compare cross-platform to see differences and maybe document those. So here, yeah, I think here, I think I had some of these examples. Okay, sure. So that's a yes.
Perfect. Another question that just came in, what is the difference between Schema Compare and synchronization?
Okay, so here's a Schema Compare window, and the results set, and then here so after the compare, okay, so the two things to point out there, for synchronization is only available same platform, right? So here, if I wanted to compare these SQL Server or Oracle databases, I could shift click, control click, right click. If it's same platform, you can schema compare or schema synchronize. If they were different platforms, you only have the schema compare available. Okay, so that's a difference in terms of what you can execute in terms of the schema compare or schema synchronize. And then with the schema synchronize, you have this synchronization field is populated. So when I run a schema synchronization, this column sync will be displayed, and this icon synchronized schema will be enabled, where you can generate the migration script. So for schema compare, it's read only, and we'll just show you the differences. Schema synchronization enables the sync column, the synchronized schema icon, and then we'll generate the sync script or deployment script. So those are the two differences between those two windows. This additional column, and then Schema Compare is any platform. Schema Synchronize is the same platform.
Fantastic. Thanks, Devin. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Another that just came in. Does the tool support comparison of structured and semi-structured data like RDBMS and JSON?
Okay, that I would have to follow up on in terms of specifics. What you can see is the list of objects that are available. So here I was in, say, an Oracle. If I right-click Schema Compare, notice all these objects, Oracle to Oracle. Here, if I was cross-platform, that list is not as robust, and so I'd have to see where that would vary from JSON to RDBMS.
Wonderful. I think just one more question for today. Can I switch source and target when synchronizing?
Okay, so it would be from this window, and this direction would need to be switched. And so you'd go back to this window and switch those, and then regenerate this window. So that would influence this sync look and feel. But here, if I invoke this, you can choose from here. You see the script, it's modified, so you have the ability to explore that. But if you wanted to generate the different direction, it would be from the Schema Synchronize window, and you'd flip-flop the direction there. So either Control-click in the right direction here, where you start with your source and target, or from this window, you'd need to use this double arrows to switch those, and then generate the sync script from here.
Wonderful. Well, that is all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Devin for an informative presentation, and I invite you all to head over to aquafold.com to learn more and download a free trial of Aqua Data Studio, which Devin highlighted for us today. This webcast has been recorded, and we will send a follow-up email to all attendees with a link to our Resource Center, where the recording will be available for viewing in a few days. I hope everyone has a great week, and we hope to see you back at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.